The moment the Farnan ship broke atmosphere, you could feel the shift in air. Not literally, though some claim they could, but socially, academically, almost spiritually. Earth's Global Culinary and Biological Institute had never hosted a full delegation from the Galactic University of Reshkan before, and for good reason. The Reshkan University only acknowledged civilizations that had at least 5 centuries of continuous biochemical data archiving. Earth had about 2.5 centuries of that. The rest? Scattered cookbooks, war recipes, and Reddit threads. Still, Earth's food had become an oddity of interest across the galaxy. A backwater planet where intelligent primates casually ingested known irritants, metabolic accelerants, and in the case of the infamous Carolina Reaper chili, neuroactive alkaloids so potent they were classed as edible deterrents in at least 11 planetary databases. They were met with fanfare. Press, translators, the diplomatic corps. Trevor Langford, a human culinary chemistry student second year, pale, wiry, a man who never touched dairy without consequences, stood at the back of the main auditorium, watching the Farnans descend. They looked like translucent stingrays, with legs, thin gossamer fronds hanging where their version of ears might be, exoskeletal ridges that shimmered slightly under Earth's gravity. And at the front of them, his chin raised in a way that somehow conveyed smugness without a single facial muscle, was Treelok. Treelok was already famous, top of his xenobiology class, multiple holocasts under his name, and a brutal thesis on culinary regression in pre-fusion species. He didn't so much walk into the lecture hall as glide with an air of predetermined superiority. Trevor leaned toward his lab partner, Lena. I give him a week before he tells someone our food belongs in a petri dish. Lena smirked. I give him an hour. It took 28 minutes. Treelok took the podium and tapped the translator node on his thoracic plate. The device flickered and projected his voice in a smooth, clipped tone. Human food, while energetically varied, presents an unusual evolutionary stagnation. You rely excessively on thermal excitation, cooking, which breaks down proteins but also annihilates most phytochemical complexity. This results in what I classify as primitive heat slop. There was a pause. A dozen human students stiffened. A few alien delegates from neutral species blinked in silent solidarity. Trevor stood very still. Treelok continued. Your spices, particularly the capsaicinoids, are indicative of desperation. Rather than adapting to avoid toxic flora, you weaponized it gastronomically. This reflects not biochemical resilience, but an alarming disregard for digestive harmony. Trevor's hand went up. Treelok's eyes, if the forward sensory nodes were indeed eyes, turned toward him. Yes, you, he said. Trevor cleared his throat. With respect, your analysis leaves out receptor variants. Capsaicin doesn't harm humans. We evolved to experience it as heat because it binds to TRPV1 pain receptors. Our bodies don't treat it as a toxin. Treelok's fronds twitched. And yet it induces sweating, inflammation, and involuntary vocalizations. That is the definition of a toxic response. A few chuckles. Trevor tried not to roll his eyes. That's also how we react to exercise, or crying. Treelok tilted slightly. Fascinating. You equate agony with nourishment. Then it happened. Treelok turned to the human audience, his voice louder. To demonstrate the biochemical robustness of my species, I volunteered to consume your most intense specimen. What do you call it, the Carolina Reaper? Lena whispered. Oh no. Trevor's stomach dropped. Wait, that's not a good id. Bring it forth, Treelok announced. Campus kitchens were warned. The Reaper was retrieved from the Institute's secured botany lab. It was handled with gloves, placed in a sterilized isolation dome, and then escorted to the auditorium under full hazmat protocol. The lead botanist, Dr. Ellison, tried to intervene. He shouldn't eat this, she said to the diplomatic officer. It's not food, it's a biological dare. The officer grimaced. He signed a liability waiver in 17 languages. Treelok stood ready. Cameras from 3 systems hovered. The chili, deep red and angry-looking, was placed on a tray. With both hands long, sinewy, multi-jointed fingers, Treelok picked up the chili. Observe, he said grandly. as Farnan biochemistry triumphs over primitive irritants. And then he ate it. Chewed. Swallowed. Silence. For precisely 4 seconds. Then Treelok's limbs snapped back. His spine, if you could call it that, arched sharply. The gossamer fronds on his head flared outward, vibrating violently. A strangled sound escaped him. Brska! He collapsed. Instantly, 4 medics bolted in, 2 human, 2 alien. The alien medics shouted for a decontamination shield. Treelok's body had gone into convulsions. His skin, normally pale with a slight blue tint, flushed to a deep violet. Vascular patterns flared beneath the surface, pulsing erratically. His breathing became shallow, rapid, then halted altogether. Trevor was pushed back as the emergency team moved in with intravenous lines, neural dampeners, and oxygenation foam. A diagnostic scanner blinked red. Systemic, neurogenic shock. Treelok's body had identified the capsaicin as a full-spectrum neurotoxin and launched a biochemical war on itself. Hours later, Treelok was sealed in a transparent quarantine pod inside the Earth Institute medical unit, surrounded by both human and alien doctors. He lay semi-conscious, spasming gently as nanoprobes tried to stabilize his neurotransmitter flood. Dr. Tanaka, chief of xenomedicine, frowned over the charts. His temperature is climbing, not because of infection, but due to nerve overactivity. His body thinks it's on fire. Trevor sat outside the pod window, pale. Is he gonna die? Not if we keep the neural storm under control, Dr. Tanaka said. But he's in for a long 3 days. Inside the pod, Treelok thrashed weakly and mumbled something about flaming root orbs. The translator couldn't parse it. By the end of day 1, Earth's culinary staff were suspended pending review. A planetary ethics board was convened. Words like culinary assault and xenogastric protocol violations were thrown around. By day 2, Treelok had started hallucinating vividly. Reports included him trying to crawl up the pod walls to escape a giant cilantro beast and screaming at floating peppers that accused him of hubris. By day 3, he was lucid but quiet. His body, finally stabilized, was exhausted. Trevor visited during the final observation period. You awake? Treelok blinked slowly. The peppers knew my name. Trevor snorted. That's the capsaicin talking. There was a long pause. I underestimated your species, Treelok murmured. Your food is not primitive. It is weaponized complexity, subtle chemical warfare disguised as flavor. Trevor nodded. Yeah, we call it lunch. Treelok stared at him. Then, very slowly, he said, I wish to stay. I must study it. Trevor blinked. Wait, you want to stay? After all that? Your food attempted to kill me and failed. Treelok's fronds drooped slightly in what Trevor swore was reverence. I have never been more intrigued. The ethics board convened 40 hours into Treelok's medical isolation. They'd transformed one of the Institute's conference halls into a temporary ethics chamber, complete with neutral lighting, biosensory filters, and translator rings for species whose communication methods required electrochemical modulation or, in one case, musical tempo. Dr. Elandra Rhee, Earth's lead liaison to the Galactic University, stood at the central podium, her jaw set and voice steady. For the record, the Carolina Reaper was not forced upon the Farnan delegate. Treelok requested it publicly, in the presence of witnesses and documentation. A Gashari biochemist from the ethics board, gelatinous and draped over a hydration plate, vibrated a disapproving hum. And yet, it gurgled, you served him a biochemical known to trigger mammalian panic reflexes, thermoregulatory failure, and pain mimicry. In my system, we use capsaicin analogs to repel caveworm infestations. Dr. Rhee didn't flinch. In our system, we use it to make tacos. The room went still. She continued. This isn't about intent, it's about context. Earth cuisine isn't a trap, it's evolved alongside our biology. We sweat, we cry, and then we ask for seconds. That's not malice, that's culture. A slow blink from the Resh Khan adjunct delegate, whose physiology resembled a sentient mushroom. Your culture may require hazard warnings. Meanwhile, in the med facility, Treelok had stopped trying to claw imaginary paprika demons out of the air. He was now sitting up, monitored by an array of sensors, his skin still flushed in hues no Farnan was ever meant to exhibit. His electrolyte levels had finally stabilized, but the aftershocks of neurogenic response left his limbs twitchy and reflexes misfiring. Dr. Tanaka gently checked his vision again. Pupil reaction normal. No new seizures overnight. Any pain? Treelok looked down at his own fingers like they'd betrayed him. There is a tingling. That's the nerves coming back online. You might feel hypersensitive for a few days. Light, sound, even flavor. Treelok's fronds shivered slightly. No more flavor, not yet. At the edge of the room, Trevor leaned against the wall with a hydration bottle in hand, watching. You're lucky, he said finally. You only ate one. Treelok turned to him, eyes wary. You mean there is more than one? Trevor held up the hydration bottle and tapped the label, Ghost Pepper Electrolyte Infused Recovery Water, Mango Lime. Treelok stared at it like it might ignite. You drink that for pleasure? Some of us do, Trevor said with a shrug. Me? I like medium heat. I cried for 10 minutes after eating a Reaper once. Didn't hallucinate though. Treelok closed his eyes, exhausted. You people are biochemical anarchists. Trevor smiled. Welcome to Earth. On the third evening, once Treelok had stopped trembling and could keep down nutrient paste, a diplomatic assistant brought in his personal effects. Among them, his data slate. He opened it with some effort, the interface dimmed to accommodate his overstimulated vision. For 2 hours, he said nothing. Just read. Trevor had long since given up trying to understand the alien holoscripts, but when Treelok finally spoke, his voice was steadier than before. I watched 6 hours of something called Hot Ones. Trevor blinked. Wait, the interview show? With wings? Yes. They invited your celebrities to answer questions while consuming increasingly toxic wing sauces. One woman openly wept while discussing childhood trauma and licking her own fingertips. Trevor chuckled. Yeah, that's about right. Treelok looked genuinely disturbed. You turned pain into ritualized entertainment, chemical torture, as bonding. It's called having a weird Friday night. There was silence for a moment. Then Treelok leaned back, tentative muscles twitching. Do you know what happened when a Farnan child once consumed a native root with similar properties to your chili? Trevor shook his head. He received 3 gene therapy cycles, 6 days in a stasis tank, and an apology broadcast from the Agricultural Guild. The root was outlawed. A monument was erected in his honor. Trevor nearly choked. You built a monument? Yes, Treelok said without irony. A stylized root, bent in agony. He paused, fronds swaying gently. And yet here, you celebrate the burn. It is not a warning. It is a challenge, a threshold to be crossed. Trevor took a slow breath. Pretty much. Treelok stared out the window, watching as twilight faded over the campus grounds. Human students were walking across the quad, laughing, eating from foil-wrapped street food, daring each other to try pickled habaneros from a vending machine. I wish to understand this, he said softly. Not just the pain, but the desire, the meaning. You took what should have killed you and made it culture. Trevor raised an eyebrow. So, you're saying, I wish to stay, Treelok said firmly. I wish to request asylum not for political reasons, but for scientific curiosity. Trevor was silent for a moment. You know that means more than just lab work. You'd be subject to Earth customs, laws, dietary ambiguity. Treelok nodded. I wish to study flavor as a discipline, not just nutrition, but experience. A biochemical phenomenon that intertwines biology and identity. Trevor leaned back, nodding slowly. Well, you're gonna need a better stomach. I will adapt. Trevor smiled. Then we're gonna start with ketchup. The asylum request made it into every planetary feed by morning. The incident had already gone viral. Alien student tries Earth chili, sees spicy demons. But now, Treelok's decision to stay became something else entirely. A culinary uprising. A challenge to centuries of sterile, calculated nutrition across the stars. Footage from his lecture and collapse ran alongside human cooking competitions and clips of people sobbing over ghost pepper noodles. Galactic memes erupted. Caricatures of flaming vegetables chasing farnins, humans casually sipping chili oil like tea, entire talk shows asking the same question: what else are humans eating that could kill you? The Reshkan board issued a formal statement expressing deep concern over Treelok's decision and requested that his research be deferred until a full psychoneural evaluation could be completed. Treelok declined, politely. Instead, he submitted his research proposal to Earth's Gastronomic Biochemistry Department: edible toxins and voluntary ingestion, a cross-species analysis of flavor as sensory rebellion. The department approved it within hours. That afternoon, Trevor and Treelok sat outside, near a modest Earth cafeteria, sharing a tray of mild enchiladas with shredded cheese and green sauce. Treelok, still wary, sniffed each bite like it might leap up and attack him. "You're doing great," Trevor said. "Tiny bites, no spice, no fire-breathing hallucinations." Treelok nodded cautiously. "I am recalibrating." He hesitated, fork trembling slightly, then speared a piece of bell pepper. He chewed slowly, paused, then blinked. "There is sweetness." "Yeah," Trevor said. "That's a thing too." Treelok stared at the food like it had just spoken to him. Trevor clinked his water bottle to Treelok's nutrient pouch. "To your health." Treelok raised it solemnly. "And to your madness." By the time Treelok returned to public life, the campus cafeteria had a Farnan-friendly menu section. It mostly consisted of things like steamed potatoes, unsalted white rice, and something labeled emotionally neutral bread. But Treelok, now clad in a loosely draped, adaptive robe, earth fabrics apparently irritated, his recovering dermis ignored it completely. He'd begun shadowing Trevor in gastronomic biochemistry classes, dragging along his field recorder and muttering observations into it like a man documenting alien wildlife. Except he was the alien. "Ingestion begins not with need," he whispered once during lunch break, "but with anticipation, ritual, presentation. The food is experienced before it is metabolized." Trevor squinted at him over a greasy slice of cafeteria pizza. "You're just now figuring that out?" "I am understanding it biologically," Treelok said, turning his recorder back on. "Flavor is not fuel, it is psychological architecture." News crews followed him everywhere now, not just humans. Either there were Plarvian podcasters filming reaction segments called "Would This Kill Me?" and an Androsian cuisine streamer who flew in to eat raw jalapenos with a hazmat drone hovering behind him. One galactic tabloid dubbed Earth the Spice Planet. Another headlined, "Species that evolved crying becomes culinary nightmare." Meanwhile, the ethics board had not forgotten, nor forgiven. Dr. Ree received an official follow-up inquiry. "Has the Farnan been reintroduced to capsaicin-containing substances?" the memo asked, as if they were monitoring a biological weapons program. She sighed and wrote back. "He's currently analyzing fermented ghost pepper mash as part of his coursework. Recovery is complete, but the trauma is ongoing. He dreams of sentient vegetables. He keeps a flavor diary." They did not respond. One afternoon, a week after his discharge, Treelok returned from a lecture on molecular gastronomy, face twitching with what Trevor now recognized as excitement, or panic. It was hard to tell. "I have a hypothesis," Treelok declared, slapping a research holosheet onto the table so forcefully it startled two nearby students eating ramen. Trevor looked up. "What now?" Treelok pointed to the data. "I believe humans have evolved to enjoy sensory violation. You mistake boundary testing with exploration. You willingly subject yourselves to taste that mimics injury and then rate it with stars." "That's Yelp." Treelok blinked. "Is that the name of the pain registry?" "No, it's a review site." Treelok stared. "So, the suffering is archived voluntarily." Trevor rubbed his face. "Okay, this is getting weirdly spiritual." Treelok nodded gravely. "Yes, Id Island." Later that week, Treelok asked to try flavor again. Real flavor, not bell peppers or bland sauces. He wanted to confront his fear. "I must understand it," he said simply. "I must choose it this time." Trevor hesitated. "Are you sure? We're not going to repeat last week's capsaicin Armageddon." "I have studied my body's thresholds. We will begin with what you call mild spice. Trevor pulled up a local place he trusted. All right, we're getting Thai. They went to Sawatdi Kitchen, a family-run joint near the southern end of campus, where the menu ranged from no heat to destroy me, Grandma. Trevor ordered cautiously Penang curry, 2 stars out of 5. Rice on the side, coconut milk, no surprises. Treelok took the first bite with medical tools ready. Literally. He had brought a portable vitals scanner, a neural dampener, and a saline spray. The waitress, confused but polite, said nothing. He chewed slowly, then paused. Trevor waited. No hallucinations? He asked. Treelok blinked. No, but there is complexity. Heat, but layered. Floral. A bitterness I cannot name. My receptors are reacting, but not violently. Trevor grinned. That's how it starts. Treelok took another bite. He closed his eyes, his fronds relaxed. A quiet sound escaped him, something like a sigh. Later, as they walked back under the purple haze of sunset, Treelok said something Trevor didn't expect. My species defines safety by what causes no reaction, but you define life by what challenges your thresholds. That's why you run marathons, why you climb things that can kill you, why you eat that. Trevor nodded. Yeah, it's not always smart, but it's human. They stopped near a food truck that had a line of students waiting for birria tacos. A sign on the side read, "Warning, not responsible for flavor-induced tears." Treelok smiled faintly. I think I am beginning to understand your madness. The next day, Treelok presented his interim research findings at a special lecture titled Capsaicin as Cultural Catalyst, Redefining Toxin Through Intent. The auditorium was packed. Delegates from 3 planetary consulates attended. The cafeteria made chili-themed hors d'oeuvres. Someone showed up wearing a costume shaped like a habanero. Treelok stood at the podium, taller now, confident, even with the occasional neural misfire still flickering in his fingers. I misjudged you, he began. I believed your food to be primitive because it was painful. I equated sensory volatility with biochemical inferiority. He gestured to a projection of human foods labeled with their Scoville heat ratings, from black pepper to pure capsaicin extract. But in truth, your cuisine is a confrontation, a dialogue between what is bearable and what is transformative. You have taken what should repel you and made it art. He paused, hands folded neatly, voice even. Human cuisine does not coddle the eater. It challenges them to survive flavor, and in doing so, it creates meaning. A beat of silence. Then, thunderous applause. Even the Gashari ethics liaison, who had once accused Earth of culinary barbarism, applauded, slowly, moistly. Trevor, from the second row, just smiled. That night, on galactic social feeds, clips from Treelok's lecture exploded. Reaction videos, parody songs, and even one animation featuring him as a chili-fighting superhero circulated within hours. The phrase, "survive flavor," trended across 7 species. The Reshkan board released a disapproving statement. Treelok replied with a detailed recipe for low-heat mushroom risotto. As his research deepened, Treelok continued pushing boundaries. Slowly, carefully, he kept a recovery kit with him at all times, not out of fear, but respect for the power of flavor. He even joined a local student food group, attending mild wing nights and experimenting with sweet, spicy fusion dishes. His hallucinations never returned. But he did keep a small notebook where he'd drawn, in surprisingly expressive sketches, the flaming vegetables of his nightmares. He called it "the taste that hunted me." He started sharing it at culinary showcases. It won an art prize. One late evening, Trevor found him sitting outside, watching steam rise from a paper container of mapo tofu. You good? Trevor asked. Treelok nodded slowly. I burned my tongue. You gonna be okay? Treelok lifted his head, eyes thoughtful. It hurts, but I like it. It had been 3 months since Treelok nearly died in a lecture hall, and the smell of roasted chilies no longer made his vascular ridges twitch. The final phase of his research was under review. A dual thesis, one half for Reshkan's Galactic University, the other for Earth's Gastronomic Biochemistry Department, titled Toxic Palate. Voluntary irritant consumption as a cultural and neurological identity construct. It was more than data. It was a philosophical pivot for a species that had, for millennia, treated all sensory pain as a sign of failure. And yet, Treelok stood now in Earth's largest culinary laboratory, a borrowed apron draped awkwardly over his narrow shoulders, watching a pot of simmering tomato chipotle stew while his assistant timed the boil. 3 more minutes, Trevor said, glancing at the burner. Then stir, taste, breathe, and don't panic. I will not panic, Treelok said. This is the 28th iteration. My tongue lining has fully regenerated. The lab had been converted into a controlled tasting environment. 2 biomonitors, 3 species-neutral emergency kits, and a filtered air system for spice particulates. In the corner, a camera hovered silently, streaming the experiment live to a dozen planetary observers, some eager to learn, others visibly bracing for disaster. Treelok reached for a small ceramic spoon, dipped it, brought it to his mouth with reverent slowness. The taste hit, not violently, but with complexity. He paused, breathed in. The heat spread not like fire this time, but like the glow of a memory, bright, earthy, smoky. I feel, he whispered, then frowned. What? Trevor asked, stepping forward. Happiness, Treelok finished. Trevor exhaled. Well, that's the capsaicin, working on your endorphins. No, Treelok said slowly. It is not the chemical, it is the achievement. I tasted this same base compound once and nearly died. Now I taste it and remember surviving. You metabolize your past, Trevor. Humans have weaponized memory into flavor. Trevor laughed. We call that comfort food. Treelok stared into the stew like it had just explained the nature of time. Later that week, the final review board arrived, not to assess medical safety, but academic merit. Representatives from Earth, Resh Khan, and 2 culinary science institutions from other systems convened in a modest auditorium to hear Treelok's presentation. This time, there was no spectacle, no stunt, no fire, just slides, data, slow speech, and meticulous citations. He walked them through his journey, from dismissing human cuisine as primitive heat slop to documenting his own reaction to capsaicin as a near-lethal sensory cascade. I misunderstood pain, he said, calmly. I thought it was always a barrier. But humans have taught me that it can also be a language, one that connects past to present and self to species. He didn't dramatize the hallucinations or the 3-day medical crisis. He didn't need to. The science spoke for itself. Blood oxygenation levels, neurotransmitter spikes, immune responses. Then came the socio-cultural data, spice as status, challenge, identity, even grief. Pain, Treelok said in closing, is not always suffering. In the right hands, it is an invitation to transformation. The panel was silent for a full minute. Then, the Reshkan delegate stood up. She was older, her fronds silvered with age, and her expression unreadable. She tapped the table once, slowly. This research, she said, violates many assumptions we hold dear. Treelok lowered his gaze. Yes. She paused. Good. The vote was unanimous. Paper accepted. Research ratified. Treelok was now the galaxy's first certified xenogustator, a new interdisciplinary title created just for him. Earth's gastronomic biochemistry department granted him a teaching fellowship. His first course, sensory psychology and the spice threshold. Months later, Trevor walked past the old lecture hall where it all began. There was a plaque on the wall now, not a monument, but close. On this site, the first Farnan consumed a Carolina Reaper and lived to publish. In honor of curiosity, resilience, and regrettable choices. Trevor smiled, adjusted his backpack, and kept walking. He found Treelok in the lab kitchen, preparing a batch of controlled low Scoville chili jam for a class. Treelok glanced up. You are 2 minutes early. Figured I'd bring the control group, Trevor said, holding up 2 sandwiches, one plain, one definitely not. Treelok reached for the spicier one without hesitation. Bit, chewed, swallowed, blinked once. Cayenne? He asked. Trevor grinned. Ghost pepper extract. Welcome to intermediate level. Treelok nodded solemnly. My internal temperature has risen. My hands are moist. I believe I may cry in 6 to 8 minutes. You'll be fine. I know, Treelok said. He turned back to the counter, writing notes in his flavor diary. On the page, sweetness balanced by regret, heat intensifies memory, good pairing with citrus. Outside, a group of first-year students waited for their workshop to begin, chatting nervously about flavor profiles and nerve endings. Treelok stepped to the doorway, cleared his throat, and addressed them. Welcome, he said. Today we taste the threshold. Please hydrate first. They laughed, nervously. Treelok smiled, truly smiled. And somewhere, across the galaxy, another young alien reached for a human recipe with a mix of curiosity and terror, because Earth's legacy was no longer just war or invention. It was the astonishing fact that they'd looked into the abyss of pain, seasoned it, bottled it, and offered it with a side of chips.